Hey, it's Coach Mo.
Hey, it's Coach Mo.
Hey, it's Coach Mo.
So, Francis, share with us, what is your professional career path? Like, where did you start and where are you now?
Sure. Thanks, Monique. I'm an engineer by training. I did a couple of degrees in operations research and industrial engineering at Cornell. And as you can hear from my accent, and just so that your listeners know, I'm not exactly, wasn't exactly raised in the United States. I was born in Massachusetts, born near Cape Cod, lived in Jamaica through the end of high school, and then came back to college in upstate New York, Cornell. Worked for AT&T Bell Labs, Bell Laboratories for 5 years, and then started my own company. And that's what I've been doing ever since. I just moved the company to Jamaica in 2005, 16 years ago. Came back with the wife, and I've been here ever since. So I never intended to be an entrepreneur, to be honest. I've always had leadership traits, I guess. I usually get picked to lead whatever I'm doing, whether I want to or not. But
it was just you. You seem like you could lead the charge.
Every single, if not every time, most times. But I never intended to be an entrepreneur through college. I remember that there were courses that were taking place in the business school, and I could have taken them, but it just never seemed to interest me. It wasn't until my father started his company about 3-4 years after I graduated, the light bulb went off, and I said, "Ooh, I like the sound of that."
Oh.
But I never grew up in an entrepreneurial family.
So what were you at first glance thinking of doing when you were off to Cornell? What is it that you aspire to do professionally?
Well, I got lucky because when I did the SATs, there was a section in the form at the time that, and this is all pre-internet for those who,
right.
May sound like a long time ago, but there was a question that said, "What's your preferred career path?" And I was always good at the sciences, and I know I didn't want to do medicine. And the choices were electrical engineering, mechanical, chemical, and I was kind of like none of the above. And then I saw something saying industrial engineering, and I thought that was one of the choices, and I was like, well, what the heck is that? Because nobody knows what that is. And I went to go look it up, and it was the marriage of people and engineering, the optimal allocation of scarce human resources, time, money. It has to do with allocation of resources, and human resources is one big part of it. So I said, boy, I didn't know there was anything with this name on it. So sure, I'm interested. So I signed up. I looked for schools that actually had industrial engineering, applied to those, got into most, I think maybe most or all of them, decided on Cornell, and I stayed with it all the way through, right up until today. I still use the principles I learned in the very first year of school.
Oh my goodness. And so, when you even made the comment about somehow you just found yourself in a leadership role, to what degree does possibly being a type A personality play into that? Because that's what we're talking here about today. Do you describe yourself as a type A personality, Francis?
Yeah, and just in case you're recovering, but just in case your audience may not know what a type A personality is, if you're an aspiring leader, chances are you are impatient, you are very competitive, very driven, you're highly energetic, you use the clock and the calendar a great deal, you tend to be very highly organized. You can get yourselves into all kinds of trouble if you're an extreme type A, because you may be rough around the edges and a bit of a steamroller at times when it comes to dealing with other people. Not the softest touch, because what you really care about are the results. And extreme type A's will care about the results and not care about people's feelings, and therefore cause a problem. So I've dealt with that, I would say, my whole life. My father was it's easy to see him as a type A, and I kind of wanted to do everything he did in the way he did it, as close, not career-wise, but everything else-wise. So I grew up always sort of being put in a leadership position from the time I was in primary school, going into high school, I was what we call the school captain. I was always that guy. I always got pretty good grades, came first in my class. I also played sports. So I was into everything, doing everything the way a type A would.
And
but
good at it.
And yeah, I was pretty good at it. But it wasn't until years later that I discovered what a type A was. And I was like, oh my God, that's like my entire life. And then I read all the downsides and I thought, ooh, okay, that's the part of me I don't like.
Well, and as a coach working with high achieving professionals, that's something I certainly witness, being a coach to individuals as you describe as a type A. So let's think big picture, because when you're a young professional coming up, it's all of that you've been able to accomplish that makes you stand out. You've gotten the results, right? You make things happen. So from your perspective now, how do you bridge that, being a young professional who knows how to get things done, is seen as successful? What's the bridge to that same individual then achieving professional career growth and satisfaction?
Oh, it takes you so far and then no more. So you may get through college on type A fuel. Yeah. Because you'd be more organized than the average person. You'd be more driven. You'd be more focused. You'd sit in the front row of class. You'd raise your hand at every opportunity. So those behaviors are great for getting good grades, and they'll get you to near the top of the class, and you'll graduate magna cum laude, and you know you'll in a demanding major, and you look for the next challenge because you love challenges. So unfortunately, that doesn't carry over too well into other parts of life, like marriages, or raising children, or even being a manager in the workplace, where you must now contend with other kinds of people. And in your first managerial role, as you start to interact with people, all of that type A energy and strength and competitiveness doesn't work. No, I don't say it doesn't work. It gets a lot of CEOs to the corner office. But along the way, their competitive nature and their drivenness and their energy, it'll get them to the corner office ahead of others, and they'll win, so to speak. But once they've won, they run into a problem, because at that point, probably before then, it's more about collaboration than it is about beating other people. And many type A's carry that same energy all the way through, which means that when they get to the top of the hill and they say, hey, I'm number one, they look back. There's nobody behind them.
Right. People are spread out.
They've run for the hills. I've had that happen with clients as well. You know, people that I've worked with, and after working with them, I say, okay, we're never again. Right. And I actually made a pretty much a deliberate attempt, because early on, somewhere around high school, I picked up a book on the 4 types, which was basically a DISC, kind of a book on the 4 descriptors, four types, and used that, and it was very insightful. And I thought, oh my God, I could use this. Later on, I did the MBTI right as soon as I joined AT&T, and I got really interested in kind of my potential, how to tap into it. I picked up a Tony Robbins book for the first time. I started to really think about where I wanted to go in my life. And it forced me to look at myself, not forced, but it led me to look at myself in some more depth and start to see some glaring inconsistencies and weaknesses. And that began I would say a concerted effort between the first or second year at AT&T, all the way through about 2010, I'd say, to improve my interpersonal skills. I also actually took coaches training at Coach University, 1994. Thomas Leonard.
This is like on the front edge.
Nobody knew what coaching was, and I had to lie, really. But I did the training, and that of course was very, very helpful.
So what was that evidence that you were experiencing in the workplace that led you to that thought process of, oh, I've got to do some things differently?
It was a commitment that I had. Shortly after arriving in the United States, I realized I'd been away for so long that I wanted to return to Jamaica. Mm. And what made me want to go back was this kind of, commitment to make a difference, where I knew it could be made in bucket loads, so to speak.
The opportunity was great. There was great opportunity.
We're a very impoverished country, by U.S. standards, and it doesn't take much to make a big difference here. We're also very connected community-wise. That's a big plus. But the fact is, we have a legacy of 300 years of slavery, and we got our independence in 1962 as a country, but we were left with severe deficits that continue today, including just basic literacy. So we have some big challenges. And as I was a freshman on campus at Cornell, we had all you can eat luncheons and dinners, and I was on the meal plan. I remember just being boggled that there was so much food going to waste. And I knew people, guys in my class in high school, who sometimes went hungry. So the contrast just sort of firmed up my resolve to be back in Jamaica contributing. It took me 21 years to close the loop, but I'm glad I did.
So as you now reflect on who you were during this process of change, what did you identify as your greatest, let's say, growth, elements within you? How did you grow?
Boy, I struggle to list every single soft skill that exists, because that's kind of how it was. I was raised as a technical professional. There was absolutely no soft skills training in college. I may have taken an industrial relations course, but afterwards, because of the kind of role I was in, so I was fortunate, or maybe I chose this kind of work because I really liked it. I was in an internal consulting unit in AT&T, and we had the fortune of flying around the country and helping different units in AT&T improve the way they did their performance. So consulting is a very, very soft skill. Once you get past the initial kind of, all right, we need to have a technical background. Okay, what next? Okay, it's all soft after that. They didn't say it to us that way, but that is in fact what was happening. That's what happened. And after a couple of failures, I said, okay, so what's going on here? Why aren't people just grasping the logic of what? And I remember my first day on the job, or second day, it was a Friday. I joined on Thursday and it was a Friday. They had a soft skills training for like a half a day. And I laughed. I was like, this is nonsense. This is foolish. Distinctly remember saying this is foolishness. We are engineers. Why are we doing this soft skills nonsense? It took the failures for my eyes to open, and then combined with my wanting to come back to Jamaica, and I wanted to be a successful consultant. I realized that I had not been taught the basics of what I needed to do the job as an effective coach and assistant to other professionals. I hadn't been taught the basics of how to deal with people effectively. So that began an intense, I didn't think I learned another technical subject.
But I'm curious, what made it a failure? I mean, just one example, as you think about, you were talking about your consulting and you had experienced failure. So what made it a failure? Was the project just shelved, did not go forward? Did someone want you removed off of the assignment? I mean, what made it a failure?
Boy, no, it wasn't as dramatic as that. It just, I just had a sense that it wasn't reaching my standards because there were people I needed to influence. So I'd meet people for the first, second, third time, and I'd want to move them along to be able to implement the suggestions I was making. So this happened to be in factories, and the way they were doing the work wasn't working. And I could see it from a technical point of view. So my job was to convince them to change their behavior. And that seemed like a very logical process to me. So I would, be logical and tell them.
Tell them louder.
Thank you. More logic, more volume, more emphasis.
I have the answers. I'm going to tell you how to do it. And I'm going to tell you more. I'm going to tell it to you in a different direction. And so then we discover
Doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, type A. This is a type A story.
Mm-hmm.
This is what happens with type A's who have the benefit of being in a job that they can't do without other skills,
Mm-hmm.
or having a failure like a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a spouse kind of give them feedback.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it all kind of happened very early on because I was married like 1 month out of college. I was one of those folks who got married right away.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of things were happening that were making me scratch my head and saying, this is not quite what I envisioned, and I don't understand why.
Mm-hmm. Because we're so in our head, right? And coming up through high school, college, and you're getting accolades. So the accolades reinforce that, well, I must be doing it all right. And then comes the spouse, relationships, close relationships with friends, and in particular, those over time, and you start to see patterns that aren't serving you or them. And then in the workplace, colleagues, and now you're responsible because you're now leading these other people. Why aren't my talents of what got me to this point working now? And so what is it that you're doing to support the type A personality that's out here in the professional arena?
Well, I've made a bit of a discovery, or I put, I guess, two and two together in the work I'm doing in productivity and task management.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've stumbled across in a way is, based on my own examples, type A's tend to pick up more projects because they have a higher ambitions. And this is not to say other people aren't ambitious, but the most ambitious people tend to be type A's. This just goes with the territory.
Mm-hmm.
High ambitions leads to lots of projects. Lots of projects leads to lots of tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of tasks requires a peculiar approach in the way you manage your personal productivity.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've said to you may sound very obvious, but there's very few people who actually say what I just said.
Mm-hmm.
The connection isn't made.
Mm-hmm.
The thought is more like, well, we know that people need different approaches to their productive task management, but we don't know why. And there certainly is, the research is kind of like, we don't know why. But I've gone ahead and said, well, it's because they're type A's. That's the big driver. Mm-hmm. And it's their ambitions. It's their wanting to accomplish more and more and more and more. That's what leads them to push themselves harder than other people push themselves. Mm-hmm. And that practically means that, for example, and this is sort of the end of the story in a way, this is why they need to use a calendar and not a to-do list. Mm. Now that, it sounds like a huge jump from where I'm coming from to where I'm saying, but in my work, I've laid out a careful set of reasons that says, here's why, if you're this way, you need to manage your tasks in this way. And I sort of laid out a logic that says, here's what you got to do, because if you're this ambitious, goes with the territory.
Well, and what I love about this is, for our listeners, you will be joining me in another episode where we're talking more specifically about time management and managing those tasks. I believe it does start, however, with how you are wired in that personality, those behavioral tendencies that you have. Because what I've now, as I hear you describe the type A personality, those characteristics that get in the way, and then the awakening of how to get to the tomorrow, is almost like driving a stick shift car. You're in the same car, but you have to then develop the muscle on when to draw certain talents and skills down, level it down for the sake of the situation, for the sake of the results, and then kick it back into a higher gear.
That's very well put. Very well put.
Because I work with clients. I'm a certified strength coach, and it's not denied. People often want to go, well, let's talk about our weaknesses. And when we have an opportunity to get there in a discussion, either with an individual or a group, it's your weaknesses are probably right there with the same strength. Those things that make you strong are those very things that get in your way. It's you having to discover when and how to apply it at the right time in the right situation, because trying to go into some self-discovery mode and thinking you've got to become something you're not. Okay, let's just get rid of that.
Right.
You're not trying
Right.
to be something you're not. No one's trying to have that happen. There are traits and characteristics that support you in your greatness. And so type A personality, yes, getting things done, achieving the goals for the individuals, the teams, the organization, how to manage that for
How
yourself.
to be an effective leader
Exactly.
in circumstances in which you may not need the person in the front kind of leader, because there are many ways to lead. But the type A really only knows one way, which is see if you can keep up.
Exactly. Keep up. So describe, if you will, an example or a situation of someone that you've worked with and what that transition was for them.
Yeah. So there's one fellow I worked with who he pulled regularly 20 hours a week, 20 hours a day, kind of shifts, 7 days a week during intense periods for several months. So the shift is not complete by any means, but he's understanding himself at a level where at least he's accepting that this is not sustainable. I mean, this is someone who's worked. If you've ever heard of people who work themselves sick, this is someone who has enough energy to work himself sick. And he's done it about 3 times from what I understand.
So that's the evidence, right?
Yeah.
Physically, his body responds in some way.
There's other evidence too. I mean, he's literally he heads up a company. He's literally the hardest worker in the company by far, by way far. So he just works everyone. Everyone else is exhausted, and they don't want to have anything to do with the lifestyle he leads, because it's extreme. It's like he's an Olympian and running the 100 meters in 9 seconds. It's so extreme, and there's no one who can really keep up, and he doesn't really, because type A's don't really hang around other type A's and talk about their feelings.
Right.
It's more like they meet together and brag. Oh yeah, I got a boat. Oh yeah, I got a Mercedes.
Exactly. All that external stuff, right?
Right. It's more about the competition than it is asking questions around, well, can I sustain this pace? So he's on this journey, of reversing a lot of really accepted behaviors. His job, the kind of work he does, it completely supports his type A-ness to a point. Now but the employees, of course, they notice, and they want, as I said before, nothing to do with that lifestyle. So that they have no interest in staying to become like him.
Well, and let's look at this. Look at the possibility of an outcome in trying to continue 20 hours out of a 24-hour day. What happens when you flatline? Where's the company then? Where are all your employees then?
He had a partner.
Yeah, your body will tell you. And in particular, with every passing year, we're getting another year older.
A little bit older, right. So he had a partner who, he told me they worked something like 15 days straight at this kind of pace. And he did a row.
Oh my God.
The following day he collapsed, but he had already won.
But he won. So
he won.
Right.
Booby prize.
Right, exactly.
I worked myself to the point where I couldn't get out of bed a day later than someone else but this is, so type A's can easily go off the rails and not listen to other people because of kind of what where their ambitions take them. And it can produce, I mean, forget about kids and the effect that can have, or parents or spouses, or we're just focusing on the workplace for now, but it has an all-around impact. And it absolutely has an impact at work with other people who work with this individual, and they are impressed by 20 hours. And they say to themselves, not me, not ever. I'm going to leave before this bug catches me.
Right. It's that extrinsic value, that value that's coming from something outside of yourself. And
well, let me add to it though. He's intrinsically motivated. He loves what he does, but he loves what he does in a way that causes him not to pay attention to the other things that are important in his life. So if I could even say he was doing it for the money, or he's not doing it for the money, he's doing it for the love of the
sport. It's like a sport,
it's kind of like a
chase.
Sport.
It's the chase.
He loves the chase, right. Which is why it's so insidious, because he's not unhappy until he's in the emergency room. It's like, hang on a minute.
So that's a CEO example. So think of a young professional working in, let's say, what is this, AT&T of today's environment, right?
Right.
And a young professional with executive ambitions. What are some of those watch outs? What are some of the clues that, maybe time to gain some self-awareness on how you can be effective and dial back some of that personality type A? What are some of the evidence of maybe it's time to explore getting some new tools and processes in place to support you?
Boy, I don't have good news here, because my experience is that type A's need to sort of crash. They need a hard landing. It's not, didn't come easily for me. It didn't come readily. It tends to be a slam.
And what's the crash look like, so that people know it? Because sometimes people don't even know when they've crashed.
Like somebody who was working for you quits, or they give you, or you get feedback from your boss that everybody hates you, or your team goes on strike effectively, or in the workplace, or your clients. I remember one type A, she was a consultant, and her clients told her boss that they don't want to work with her anymore. They want to work with the company. They love the company, but they don't want her to come around anymore. So until something like that happens, you can get pretty far, especially if you're working for yourself, especially if you're in a profession that tends to reward type A's, like some sales professions, for example, some legal professions, a lot of doctors are type A. There are these professions in which your appreciation for other people and yourself doesn't come until later, because you don't necessarily need it to get the job done. To be a great surgeon, you could kind of get by, cutting and slicing and dicing to some degree, not really have great bedside manner, but they'll overlook it because his skills are so exquisite. But at some point, the devil will come for his due. And if you're a young type A, and any of this resonates, guys, if you're listening to this, and the first thing, if you think you're not a type A, just ask someone close to you.
Yeah, right.
Tell them some of the things that we just talked about, the impatience. And if any of that rings true, then you are definitely a type A. Just take their word for it, even though you may not say it. It's a great idea to get this kind of awareness before the slam happens, because the world is actually sending you signals right now. It's just that you're tone deaf. So other people are covering their ears because the noise of the problems you're creating is so loud, and they can barely bear it, and they are probably distancing themselves from you in subtle ways. But because you're tone deaf, you're not hearing the sound, and you're not seeing their reaction to it. So if you assume that that's true, and take my word for it a little bit, do a little investigation and ask people around you. Or compare yourself to the most type A person you can find, and kind of ask yourself, do I have some of that in me? And to what extent? And ask somebody else if you can't see it. Am I kind of like that guy? And they're like, oh yeah, you're worse. Are you kidding? You might go,
you're worse. Well, and here's the thing is, when organizations fail their organization, when they continue to advance these individuals.
Without any coaching,
and so
without any intervention.
Yeah, because then the individual continues to get reinforced for these behaviors that are not serving the organization well. And then it makes it harder to slow it down, to do some self-assessment, because why? It's working for me.
All the way to the executive
Right.
suite.
And so that's why I even work with clients. We don't even have to, with young professionals. Yeah, maybe your company's not going to sponsor like a leadership 360 or a coach, but
Right.
there are a wealth of coaches out here. You can still engage the services of a coach who knows what they are doing in that space. And you can just create your own 360. It doesn't have to be a formal online. You can create a slate of questions that you invite others to respond to, just to get some awareness for yourself. So
Yeah, I can attest to that. For 12 years, more than 12 years, I had a coach, same coach, brilliant coach who figured me out. And, I couldn't get anything by that person. You know how it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can
With
keep
someone for
telling
a
me,
while.
but I'm seeing something different. Your behaviors and your words aren't matching up. So what is it?
They can see you coming. Your tone of voice tells them everything about what's going to happen in this coaching session because they know you so well.
Yes.
When you've had one person coaching you for that long, you get a lot of movement as you go along because they figure you out.
Yes.
You can't trick them anymore with your whatever you
Right.
whatever you do with everybody
So
else.
true.
But I also had a therapist for a couple of years. I had multiple coaches in other roles. So I broke the news to one of my clients recently, and I don't do a lot of individual coaching, but I told them, I think you should have a coach for the rest of your career. And I said, he's like, oh my God,
Right.
you mean indefinitely? And I said, yeah, pretty much. But it's not an indictment on your personality. It's just that you are now about 50 and you haven't had the investment that others have had in the prior 30 years. So you missed the first 30. It's now catch-up time.
You're here now, right?
You're here now. And from now until the time you retire, if you want to continue to operate at that high level that you aspire to, these skills really should have been learned a long time ago. Now's the time to learn them. Put as much as you can into learning them because they'll serve you starting right away and they'll serve you for the rest of your career. And you might as well go into retirement, I guess with your faculties intact and not on a heart attack. I didn't say it like that, but that's kind of what I meant. Don't be a Monday morning heart attack like everybody else, who stresses himself out. And then at the end of deal with yourself now, deal with other people, get the skills that you need, and just book an hour a week for the next 15, 20 years. And I said, that would be the best thing you can do. It sounds like crazy medicine, but
But a coach who is listening to you and challenging you and knows how to challenge and stretch you in a way that opens up new possibilities, therein is some magic. So coaching is just one option. But I tell you, for many individuals who, maybe aren't trusting of other people or haven't found another way to get out of their own way, coaching certainly may be an option.
Right, especially for those kind of type A ingrained behaviors. I don't underestimate the power of, for example, a 2-week offsite, residential training. I think those are awesome. I've done those as well. They serve different purposes. And I think they both have a place. So for a type A, I would say definitely do both, because after you do the residential, you'll definitely want a coach because you want to keep all the gains that you made when you were away doing whatever it is you were doing. So I think there's benefit to combining both sort of the classroom, experiential, and having a steady hand with somebody who can eventually doesn't take much energy to keep you straight. Tremendously valuable.
As we're going to draw our time to a close now, Francis, will you share with listeners how it is you support more teams and organizations?
Sure. I'll actually share a bit about the strategy work that we do. So this is kind of like a room of type A's, typically leading a company. And we help them put together strategic plans. And we bring a kind of a facilitatory role, but we get spend time before the actual retreat, getting to know the executives and understanding what their ambitions are, and then bring them together and get their ambitions to all line up. So that kind of work, if you're interested in knowing more about it, I've written extensively about it at fwconsulting.com, which is the website that I use to focus on my strategy work. So that's one that folks can use, because many type A's need to get along with other people and put together strategies that include other people. Although some of them believe that they don't need the other people, but they usually do. You just got to talk to them.
And knowing where the resources are is so critical. And so I will definitely be sharing with our listeners ways to get in touch with you, to connect with you, if what it is that you have to offer is of interest to them. So Francis, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate having you on the Tuesdays with Coach Mo podcast.
You're welcome.
That's a wrap for this episode of Tuesdays with Coach Mo. Showing up here tells me you're willing to invest in yourself and your career. Get additional resources at tuesdayswithcoachmo.com. Please subscribe and leave a review. I'd love to get your feedback. Till next time, this is Coach Mo signing off.
Tuesdays with Coach Mo.